So moving on to introducing the next speaker, we have Renan here from Kaltura. She's going to speak about event marketers' new secret superpower is the data that they bring. So over to you.
Thank you so much. Hopefully you guys can hear me okay. Yay. And I don't have to yell. You guys can just hear me, right? Great. All right. Good job for us. So, I'm going to talk today a lot about events, secret superpower, and it's a new superpower. I think it's very different than what we've had before. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to do something a little different. I'm going to start with the takeaways because I actually know that we're right before lunch. So if you guys are hearing your stomach grumbling already, so I want to make sure you already get the bottom line right ahead. So I'm going to start with the key takeaways and you can kind of see what we're going to be talking about. And I'm going to drill into it more and more as you see that. So I do hope you'll stick around though, even if you're hungry a little bit. So we're going to be talking about one of my favorite topics, which is data. And data really is a superpower. So to everyone, it looks like you can tell the future and you can see the unseen. But really, we know it's just bringing the right data in the right place at the right time and being able to bring that together and help bring that sort of insight, that aha moment that you can really say. So, and I think when we talk so much about, how events have changed, and I really think there's so much new going on in events. There's so much creativity going on. I mean, we can just see everything going on around us. Like how many new ideas are bringing about the experiential experiences. It's pretty incredible. But I think there is one thing really interesting that's happening, and that is we've gotten really good at collecting data. We're really excellent at it, but we're still not really great at doing something with it. We really haven't gotten to the point where we can really take that data and do something different with it. And it's like we have a superpower, but we're not yet really good at controlling it yet. We don't really know yet how to fly at the right time, or we don't really know how to kick that out. So I think that's what I want to talk about today. I really want to talk about how do you use that new superpower? How do you bring that up there? And how do you kind of leverage it and think about it moving forward? So that's going to be it today. And let's start drilling into some of this stuff. So I'll start with a lot of data. And I think like all good stories, we have to start at the beginning, right? So we got to start at, we've been doing events all these years. What's changed? Like what's different suddenly? Like, why am I suddenly talking to you about all this data? And I think everything's changed. So I'm going to say the word COVID, and I'm going to try not to say it too many times today, but it has changed us in many ways. And one of the things I'm going to be showing you lots of data today as well, just because, as I told you, this is one of my favorite things. But I'll show you some stuff from research that we did on the state of virtual events. We've been doing this for a couple of years. You'll have links as well. But if you look at kind of the state of events from 2022, you'll see that 48% of marketers actually said that they will host more virtual events compared to 2021. Now, keep in mind, this survey was done around mid-2022. They were looking at 2021, which was still pretty much a COVID year. And they were already saying, COVID years, we were doing a lot of virtual events. They were saying 2022, I'm going to do even more of those. And a lot of them are going to be doing more and more events. So at this point, more events means, more data, just as a basic kind of beginning. And it's not just a lot of events, it's also about moving to hybrid, right? So when you're thinking about moving to hybrid for those big in-person events, and it's interesting, we asked, organizers, how many of them think, hybrid is going to be the new thing for in-person events, the big ones. And 90% said they're all going to be moving to hybrid within 2 years. That's huge. That's a pretty big, I don't think anyone agrees about anything in 90%. It's really hard to get that to that level of agreement on anything. But then 10% still disagree. And to those 10% that disagree, I think it's interesting to also look at the attendee perspective. And when you think about the attendee perspective, you can see that 75%, if you look there on the right for you, you will see that 75% said they will attend virtual events even after in-person events return. And actually 84% said they would always like to have the option to attend virtually and not just in person. So the attendees are actually coming in and saying, we want this and we need this sort of experience. And the organizers, on the other hand, are saying, we need this sort of, we need to be able to do hybrid. And what hybrid means is we have more people coming in, we have both virtual and in person, and we have more data. So again, we got more data there. And, so by now, hopefully we kind of get it. There's going to be more events, more virtual events, more hybrid events. We all agree on that. I want to add one more thing to the mix. And we typically don't talk about webinars. We kind of call them the different thing. They're not exactly the same, but they are a type of event. And when we did, a little get together, some content, some Q&A, it's a lead generator. So a webinar, you can kind of start to look at that as like an indicator for where the events are going. And when you start thinking about that, you look at where webinars are going, I think that's interesting because you see the numbers are skyrocketing. Webinars are really going all out. And if you look at the stats here, this one is from another survey on webinars that we did in 2023. It's the good, the bad, and the clunky, if you want to check that out. And here, what you're seeing is in the dark blue is 2022 and the light blue is 2023. And you can actually see a shift in the number of webinars that they're planning to do. So they're all moving to do more and more webinars. So more than 21 webinars instead of doing just 16 to 20 or just 10 to 15. So all of these people, they're talking more about all of these events. So, and that makes sense. Webinars are really great at what they do, right? Like they're informative. It's really easy to join. They don't take a lot of time. They do bring in a lot of leads. And I think one of the most interesting things I've seen, and it's not in our study, but I feel pretty comfortable saying it just because I've seen it in so many studies across the industry, is that we've seen B2B buyers, as an example, say they will join at least one webinar per week. And I have to say, that's a lot. Like if you're willing to join at least one webinar per week, that's a lot of opportunity. Those are, let's say, not 52 webinars a year, but you're joining quite a lot of them. And that's starting to be very interesting. That's starting to be a lot of webinars, a lot of opportunities for you to join. And, when you're adding to all of those events and hybrids, just think of all those webinars that are coming in. All of that is also coming in with the data. And that's quite a lot of content. So we talked about a lot of data, but let's talk about that type of data that we're bringing in, right? So when you're thinking about the type of data, I want us to think about kind of the depth and the breadth of data that we're bringing in, because it's very, very different than what we had before. I'm going to talk about 4 different points. We can talk about this honestly all day, but we don't have all day. Well, let's try to get it in time for the session. So I want to talk about 4 different types of ways you can look at the data and think about that breadth and depth that we're doing. So one is registration and attendance and how we looked at registration and attendance up until now. Second one is engagement scores and how you think about engagement and how you think about scoring it. Like, what is engagement? We like to talk about it. We like to talk about engagement marketing. We often talk about engagement as a way to measure things, but we never really talk about what a score is. We can talk about interactions and what those interactions mean when we meet, when we talk, when we chat, when we send a question. What does that mean to us? And we can talk about the agenda and the sessions and the speakers and how we do self-improvement, because now we have a lot of data. We can start self-improving. So let's start talking about each one of these. And I want to start with registration and attendance. And I think one thing that's important is it's just not enough to get a daily summary. It's just, I've had so many marketers kind of come in and say, I have the CEO behind me saying, so how many people are here? So how many people came into the event? How many people are listening to my keynote? And it's hard, right? You need that data now. You can't wait for it to come at the end of the day or anything like that. So you need real-time data to see what's working well and what's not, and in order to fix it fast, because you can now fix it fast. And if you're doing a global event, you need to know where you're getting traction, right? So you'll use this to make sure that your agenda, your captions, and everything else is really geared for your audience. If you're suddenly seeing a lot of people joining in from Germany, maybe you want to have German captions on your content, right? Like that adds in another level. That's really important for you to know. And you need to know it real time and in time for your event, because we all know that if it's something that event managers don't have, it's time. I actually saw that event managers is considered to be one of the high stress jobs of 2023. Once again, hitting that top, I think it was number 3 this time. I don't know when but yeah. So lots of stress. You don't need another thing to add on to that. And by the way, I'll also say registrants are also telling you what they're interested in right from the get-go. So I have here an example of kind of something that we do, and that's, when you sign up, you actually say what you're interested in, so we can give you recommendations and we can connect you to people that are interested in the same things. You saw this today when you registered to this conference as well. So the people coming in are telling you what they're interested in. That's amazing. That's amazing content. Like, where would you get that previously? So now you don't need to guess in order to build that out. You can actually give them what they're really interested in. You can build and gear that agenda for them. So really important to think about that. Have that response, see exactly which campaigns are working. You can see exactly where that trend's going, and you can do your reach across job roles, across geographies, and make sure that you're really crafting the event for their needs. The other side of it is I mentioned engagement scores, right? So we talked about those different four. Let's talk about engagement scores. And I think engagement data is just super interesting because it's no longer about did you attend or did you not attend, right? So, I mean, even look at you guys. If you guys are on the phone right now, no one would know, right? Like if you're just looking, feel free to look at your phone, it's fine. But if you're looking at your phone, you're still counted as the same engagement as if, you're sitting and really listening and really interested in what we're saying. So it's very different. And I'll give you that same example for virtual, right? If you're watching something full screen, like if you went full screen, now this is what you're watching. That is what you're doing. Like you are on, you're engaged, you're in it. And that's very different than if you put it on mute, you put it and you move to another tab and you're now on your email or doing something else. Maybe you're attending, but you do not care and your engagement score is 0. So when you're thinking about that, it's really about where your focus is. Like, is this truly valuable to you? And that data is really valuable data that changes how you measure ROI or how you score leads, right? So I get a lot of questions about, hey, do virtual attendees, maybe they're not worth as much. But actually, if you start looking at engagement data, they can tell you a lot more than what they are in person about what they're doing and what they're thinking. So really different. And I mentioned here on the slide, I said, real-time data tracking, and I mentioned tricks to raise engagement levels. And I wanted to share some of the tricks that we've seen for you guys for joining us. So there's 2 tricks that I've seen that can raise your engagement score really easily when you're doing an event. One trick is to play music or like a video with like fun music. What you'll see as soon as you play music, you'll suddenly see the engagement score go up in the graphs. Like immediately you'll see that. Same way you see the engagement, you immediately see an uptick. And the reason you see that uptick is because think of it this way. You forgot you had a session, you were on another tab, maybe you're on the audio, but you're not really there. Suddenly there's music and you're like, oh, something's changed. What's going on there? You have to go back and see. You just have to. And that's true for all of us. Don't feel shy. You go to the other tab, it immediately raises your engagement score. You went back to the tab. Now you got them for another 30 seconds. You have another chance to get their attention again. Really easy trick, just between speakers or as you're moving at different topics, add music, it'll get them back in. The second thing that I've seen that was really well is switching up the speakers. And what's going on there? Suddenly someone's voice changes and you're like, oh, that's someone else talking. Who's that? Or even if you know the person, oh, what are they wearing today? Like, what are they doing? So everyone's you suddenly see that spike again. You see people coming back in and you see them going in. So super easy tricks, really small, but you can see that engagement score go up again and get their attention back. These are things that you wouldn't necessarily see if you were looking at it today or if you were ignoring what engagement actually means. So the engagement scores, super, super amazing power in order for you to really say, what are you people interested in? What do you want to focus on? Or is this really interesting for you guys? Then we have interactions. So we always talk about interactions when we talk about polls and we talk about chat and we talk about moderated Q&A and we talk about reactions, talk about all of these things, right? Like all that is great. And it's everything that's not the content, right? So we talked about engagement scores with the content, but it's everything that's not the content, everything going all around. And I think that these are not happening in a void. So today we don't really score based on participation and interest and level of interest. So again, think about it this way, right? If you are engaged in the content, if you're listening to it, if you asked the question, you got an answer back, or maybe you reached out to the speaker and connected with them on the platform, you are interested, you are engaged, you want to know what's going on. And if you didn't, and you were, on another tab answering emails on your phone, whatever it is that you were doing, and you never participated in any of it, you're not engaged. And also, again, I'm kind of coming back to that same idea I talked to you about engagement scores. You're seeing that focus go down. What if you send a poll? Will it go up? Does that poll help? Did you really, maybe you send them an announcement. Maybe that will get their attention back. Hey, soon we're going to have a fun Q&A session. We're going to open it up. Maybe you want to come back. So you really want to see measurement, and you want to factor in those different elements and get that in order to see what your attendees are getting from the event, right? And then what you're learning about your attendees. And today, honestly, we put the interactions aside, but we don't score based on them. We don't really say, here's, someone came into the session, here's how much they were truly engaged in everything that we were doing. The last bit, I think, is the one where it's a little, it's the most surprising one. Like, I think we do it sometimes intuitively, but we don't necessarily do it methodically. And that's really looking internally at our own events and saying, we just finished something. It was great. We thought it was awesome, but let's try to think about this better. So whether you can use your data to kind of create that better next experience and build out sessions and session types and agendas and speakers that are really good, and do that so that you're bringing the audience more and more, that your events are getting better and better, that you're leveraging what's good and you're ditching what's not so good, right? So I think that, we'll take some fun anecdotes, right? Again, I love the data, so I'll tell you some fun anecdotes that we've been seeing in the data across events, across customers. So one thing is we noticed people like to join virtual events during lunch. And that's true for the US, and that's true for much of EMEA. So during lunchtime, and lunchtime could vary. Some people it's 11 a.m. Some people are early eaters, and it goes all the way to 1 p.m. for the late eaters. But you can kind of see that that's the time where they like to engage most. They'll connect to the event, they'll eat their lunch and watch things. They love that period of time. It's a good time for them to listen and kind of say things. Except we saw it's different in India. In India, we saw them actually go in the evening and watch in the evening later, maybe after they put the kids to bed or something like that. So it's really interesting. If you're targeting a different type of audience, you want to think about how to schedule. And now you will know your own audience, right? You need to know exactly what audience you have. You need to know exactly what they're writing on. So you want to be able to see exactly what's going on there, and you want to see how to get to know your audience and craft better content to them, and also regionally, right? You want for each region to be able to craft that correctly. So just a small anecdote to show you, how to think about this, how to think about each of these, your agenda as a whole, and think about how to craft it for your audience. We can also look at sessions, right? So what about looking at a session in general? What about looking at a rerun of a session? Maybe you can see when you started to lose people, you can say, oh, maybe I'll cut this session a little bit shorter. This is the point where I'm losing people. Or maybe I'll lose this piece. This is the piece that got everyone's interest. Everyone got a lot of reactions here. If I'm talking about the interaction data, maybe I'll go back to this point. This seemed to put more people's attention. So if you can take a rerun and you can start comparing the data on these sessions, because you are reusing the content, right? Like we all are. Content is hard. It takes a lot of work to bring together. You're producing a lot of content. So how do you bring that in? That's when you start comparing. I'm going to do the last one, and I feel really comfortable doing this one because I'm a speaker now, and I feel like it's legitimate to say it. But what about those speakers? Good speakers are great. Bad speakers, not as fun. So how do you know you have a good speaker? And how do you kind of weed them out and bring those together? Like, it's not always your star CEO, by the way, just hinting. But, sometimes you have, someone doing a workshop and they're so engaging. They're so great. And if you would look at their engagement metrics, you look at their interactions in their workshop, you'd say, great, I need to bring this speaker up and give them more sessions, give them more opportunities. And you can start giving feedback to speakers. You can say, hey, you know what? At this point, you tend to lose people after this point in time. So maybe you can change it up a little bit, right? Like maybe you can bring things differently. And it's great feedback for the speakers because they can improve their own sessions and they can bring that back up. And you can identify more and more speakers that you're working with and see who's been working well and who maybe not the best in order to bring to your next event. So again, all of these things are really good ideas. So my point here is we're talking about all this data, but what you want to do is not just use it to collect leads or to make sure that you're reaching your goals or just to teach. What you want to do is you want to improve and you want to provide feedback to the entire team. And, it's not just for events, it's for everyone. What's the content that works best? Where do you want to put more firepower on? So we talked about a lot of data and we talked about the type of data, but I also want to think about, we talked so far about the context of a single session. And I want to start talking about what happens when you do cross events. So when you're starting to think about cross events, now your challenge is, how do you think about it, across all your marketing strategy? And, how do you think about when we go in and then, we typically go start the year and we say, what's my event strategy? Here's where I'm going to spend my budget. Here's how I'm going to do this. But you don't think about your data strategy in the same way, right? So we need to think about data strategy in the same way. And I'll give you 3 different examples where this becomes really critical. The first one is users and how you track them. If someone told you they're really interested in a topic in one event, and then they came to another event and they were interested in another topic, and then they came to a third event and they went back to the first topic, and now they're telling you more and more times, you're getting more and more data on that user, what they prefer. They prefer workshops and they don't prefer large keynotes. They prefer, this specific topic they like to watch in the evening, they like to watch later. You need to track those users, not just in a single session, not just in a single event, but across all of your engagement with them. I'm coming back to that engagement marketing idea, right? You want to track and you want to talk to them across the board. So you need to make sure that your data is tracked across the same user across all of your events. The second piece, and by the way, of course, this goes all into personalization and bringing them the right content and recommending, but you have to make sure that that user, that entity in the systems is the same. The second one is content. And I want to talk about this. This is a big pain point. I mean, producing content is a lot of money and it's hard. And producing good content, to share content, and you want to bring that out, you need a way for it to be easy to share the content. And I'm coming back to that, being able to track the analytics for that content across different contexts and events and in different places. How do you do that in a way that's easy? Like, you can't work harder for this than it already is, right? So you want to think about, how do you share content in a way that really makes it easy for everyone to do it? How do you do it as well so everyone benefits, right? We mentioned, doing German captions before. That's great. Now someone else is doing a session. Maybe they also want those captions. They can use them as well. How do you make sure that all that sticks together and stays with the content across the board? The last bit is, and this is really hard because you have to, at the end of the day, manage events in one place. I think one of the hardest things I've seen is that because you get so many measurements from so many different systems, from so many different ways, it's hard to compare. So everything that we talked about so far, each of your events is done somewhere else. Everyone measures it differently. Everyone calls engagement differently. It's hard to compare. You don't even know what you're comparing. So you have to get that consistency across systems and make sure that you have that one way of looking at all of your content together, all of your users together, all of your metrics together. You're measuring everything together at the same time. And that's a big part of just being able to do that. But once you have that, wow, like, you are now bringing a full-on engagement marketing analytics into this entire story. And you're able to bring things that are really very different than what we've ever seen today, and analyzing things in a much deeper way. So I talked about, a lot of data. I talked about, types and breadth and depth of data. And I talked about game-changing on the cross events. But I didn't really talk about, I have to say, one of the biggest pain points. And one of the biggest pain points you see here, the top challenges that everyone talks about, is it's really small, right? The first one is integrating registered data into the CRM. Like, integrations is like the worst word. I think the right after that is migrating data, but the first one is integrating data. So integrating data into the CRM. Then you have integrating event data into marketing operations. That's number 2 pain point. And then number 3 is starting to coordinate follow-up with the sales team. And then you have managing post-event on-demand resources. Integrations are horrible. Really, they are. And that's one of the things that's really hard. And I want to suggest something here to make it easier, maybe, when you're thinking about these things. And one of the critical things, I think, is to think about integrating insights and not raw data. We keep trying to integrate the raw data into all the systems and trying to bring it into the marketing automation. I see so many customers doing this. Just send everything to Marketo and whatever, it'll be there. But the problem is, these systems aren't really built for that. They're not built for events data. They're not built for engagement marketing. They're really built for something else. They're built for, for being able to interact, to create campaigns and to respond to it. They don't really know. So what you need to do is you need to be able to bring the insights from the event systems, from where you're managing events, that really understand events, and integrate the insights, that engagement score, not every piece of data about how much, when, what they did, but the engagement score, the interaction score. You want to bring those scores in, and you want to bring them into Marketo when they're cooked, when they're ready for everyone. And that makes it so much easier, because it's not just the systems are going to be easier for you, but it's also going to be easier for everyone else to understand what that is, right? It's going to be it's easier for a salesperson to say, hey, I'm giving you a lead that was really interested in this event. I figured out why they were interested. I know, how I know their content. I figured it out, but trust me on that one. But here's why this lead is super hot, and here's why we added everything to it. So you want to do the expertise where the expertise lies. Bring the data from the event management systems, have all of that, analyze it there, make sure you have the right ways to analyze it there, and then bring it to the marketing automation when it's ready for action. When it's ready for action and when it's ready for everyone else to kind of consume it and understand it, so everyone else that's sitting on that system can see it. And I think it's really hard. And that's the reason we see so much difficulty here, because we're throwing all the data in and it's really hard for everyone to understand what we're looking at. But we know what that data means. We can give them back our insights, and then they can start working from those insights, and it's easier for everyone to talk about. So we all kind of agree we get greater ROI. So this is like top benefits for organizers compared to for virtual versus in person. And the number 2 one there is greater ROI. So I think everyone agrees you get greater ROI from virtual events, and we're going into hybrid, and we're doing more webinars, and we're doing all of these events. But what we have to ensure with virtual is that we're really leveraging all the data we're collecting. We're collecting amazing, amazing data. And again, I'll say we're also collecting data from in person. It's very different data. It's not as in-depth. It's not as accurate, honestly. So just make sure that whatever data is you're getting from all of these events, you're turning it into actionable insights. And you're turning it into actionable insights in a way that you can actually bring it out to the stage and bring it out to everyone to work with. So just to kind of come back to my takeaway slide, I promised I'd start with takeaways and I close out with takeaways. So I'll summarize this here. We're getting a lot more data. We have a lot more events, and this is going to get more and more in here. The data here is really unique and it's really broad. It's very different. And honestly, I think it's exciting. I mean, if you ask any digital marketer, anyone managing a website, what if I told you that I have like someone on your website for an hour hanging out and looking at the content? They would be like ecstatic. They would be like, mind blown. I can't believe this is happening to me. And we have people coming into webinars, stupid little webinars, and sticking around for an hour, and we have their engagement, we have their focus. That is crazy. We have so much power in the data and the value of the data that we're bringing in. We just have to leverage it in the right way, right? So it's really about that depth, that breadth of data, and it's super valuable. We just have to, think about it. We have people flying around the world and coming in. I flew in here from New York to Vegas, right? That's a lot of investment in order to do that. So we're bringing in time. Time is our most valuable resource. I think we need to look at that and think about how valuable that data it is that we're bringing. We need to think about event strategy. And when we're thinking about event strategy, think about our data in the context of our event strategy. It goes together. So think about it across events. And when you're integrating and when you're communicating with other teams, find that way to communicate the insights, to communicate and find systems that help you do that. Honestly, I think it's really hard. And we need to find better and easier ways to communicate those really good insights. So we can talk a lot more about this topic. It'd be great if you want to reach out, if you want to share your challenges and thoughts or anything like that. I'd be happy to do that. I'm going to be hanging out at the Kaltura booth today. If you're interested, we have all the reports and data that I shared, or most of the reports and data that I shared, some of them anecdotally, are all available in our industry reports. So there's links there, and I'm happy to share them with you if you're looking at more stuff about what's been going on and kind of see more about what's been going on, both on webinars. I didn't do a lot of the webinars, but we're happy to share that too. And on the event side, there's really fascinating items there about how much this is changing. And if you haven't had a good time, you want to see me again, I'll be at 1:30 after lunch. So don't forget to get lunch. That's very important. I'll be after lunch at our booth. It's D4. Anyway, right at the entrance. Come back from lunch and I'll be there for a demo if you want to see anything or everything else around that. So if there's any questions?
There are actually some questions. So
that's great.
The first one is the concept of attendee data across multiple events is interesting. How have you seen companies use that data when the same attendee comes to a new event?
Absolutely. So that's a great question. And I think when you're thinking about that shared user across events, first of all, it's personalization. So I'll start even from the campaign. you want to market to those attendees the right events. Don't give them a webinar about something they never cared about. Give them the webinars and talk to them about the events that they care about. And when they come into that event, don't forget to give them not just the data from that event itself, but also maybe have additional attachments or have additional white papers, have additional people contact them about everything else that they have in there, right? So you can actually start personalizing, and the systems can do it for you. You don't have to work hard. The systems are the ones doing it for you. We have the data. You don't have to worry about it, right?
Absolutely. There's a second question as well, actually. What are the benefits of broadcasting live compared to using recorded sessions on a virtual event?
That's a great question. So I'll say this. I think we should do more and more broadcasting of pre-recorded sessions. That is, you just sweat less. It's so live broadcast is great for your diet. It's not so great for your heart. So when you pre-record, you're really giving the speaker a chance to think about it, edit it, be able to be more comfortable. You're able to prepare content. You know what your speaker is going to say, and you can broadcast it as if it's live. It'll look great. No one's going to think it's pre-recorded. No one's sitting there. Oh no. You can have the speaker be live and answering questions on chat. It's amazing. You're just taking so much pressure off. Don't worry about it. And really, I have yet to hear an attendee say, this was pre-recorded. My God, that is the word. Like, it's fine. Don't worry about it. And try to do as much as you can on the Simulive. It'll just make your lives and your speakers' lives easier. If you have to do live, do live. That's cool too. I think live is good when you need people that need the excitement, that they need the audience, that they thrive on the audience, that, they want to, I heard this from a bunch of CEOs, like they need to be on stage. They need to see the people reacting, like they thrive on that energy. That's great too. I think it's a good thing. And if you need the speaker to do that, then do live. But otherwise, hey, live easy.
It's the FOMO effect, right?
Exactly.
The Super Bowl. Exactly. You want to see that live when it's happening.
Exactly. So. Well, you see it live anyway. So that's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, any questions in the audience? No, great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.